And Jordan, there's the other part of it, which they can't say, is that it was about recruiting. Man, it let the recruits come in and they got their chance because so if anyone didn't see Jordan's story, like they've been in a dead period this whole time. Like what did Powell say? He was like, I haven't been able to do anything Auburn University this entire
Yeah,
time. Like anything.
nothing Auburn University related.
You
Correct.
can't, right, because it's a dead period because of COVID. They didn't want kids traveling. They didn't want anybody getting sick, any bubbles getting burst. So the NCAA has had a dead period since a year now. And so you can't make official visits. You can't see people in person. You can't do anything like that. But when you open up the stadium for anyone to come, anyone includes potential recruiting targets. And if they want to, they can come and they can at least look from a distance and get a feel for practice. And that's what it did. It gave a lot of, and Jordan talked to a few, go to onow.com and read it. Talked to a few local targets who came and went and just, for the first time, you can't really visit. So it's an early opportunity to just kind of get a feel for practice, see them operating, see how the coaches and players interact, and just get a little feel for it. So that was another big significant part of why they did what they did and what they gained from doing that.
And I think it was smart, Justin, to the point you were making. I mean, I talked to Caden Story, who's a guy from Lynette. He's a 4-star defensive lineman. I mean, if he winds up going to Auburn, I mean, that's a big get. And, he talked about, like, he was pretty giddy about what he saw from Nick Eason. He's like, man, he was running up there, getting in the drill, like, I think that made a really good impression. And that may wind up being something that, can sway a guy like Caden at the end of the day. And the thing I like, too, you mentioned Powell Gordon. He's a guy that's committed. He's an Auburn high linebacker that's committed to Auburn. But I was talking to him and he was like, yeah, I was sitting with Eston Harris, and that's a 3-star offensive tackle from just down the road in Beauregard. It's like, we were kind of talking about, basically what it would be like if we both went to Auburn. So, I mean, that to me almost was as big, was you had one of those guys that are like, hey, come on board. We want you to play for Auburn. Like, I think that was the decision to open that up. I mean, I think you didn't give up a lot by letting people come watch you install, and there's not a lot you're sacrificing, but I think the payoff is pretty considerable. We may see that in the next few weeks and months if some of those guys who were there might wind up committing to the team.
And you kind of mentioned the payoff, Jordan. How important is it, I guess, to have these types of events when you can't recruit? How big could that be for Auburn in the era of COVID moving forward, when it could be Brian Harson's first recruiting class for a full year? How big is that for him to start doing this now?
I think it's huge, and sort of to the point I was just making, that you're not really giving up a lot by doing it. And, when you're a new head coach, you're kind of trying to, catch up. I mean, I'm sure that there's not very many people that Brian Harson and the staff are recruiting that really got to know him from Boise State. I would have to think the overlap as far as people they we're targeting and recruiting is not very high. So by doing this, they still can't have conversations with those coaches. It's not like, by going to that practice, they could go, walk down and talk to them. That's still off limits. But you got a good look at what they do during drills, how practice is organized, what kind of coaches they are. I had a few people talk about how hands-on guys like Jeff Schmedding and some of those guys appeared to be. So, you're trying to gain any kind of ground you can, and you don't have the benefit of being able to talk to these guys face to face. So I think this is huge. I think, it's important for any of these coaches to be able to have as much, whether it's contact, text and email or mail, carrier pigeon, whatever they're using. But also then just exposure, Saturday's practice was nothing more than exposure for Auburn football and this new staff. And that opportunity was a smart one. Whoever came up with that, it might've been Brad Larondo, who's the chief of staff. I know Coach Harson talked about that, that Brad and some of those guys have had conversations. I thought it was a great idea. And I think that they're going to see there's going to be some real benefits from having done that going down the line.